Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. At BriteVibe, we believe everyone deserves to be happy. But in today's world, everywhere you turn, there is division and negativity. At BriteVibe, we have created a global movement to bring 8 million people together who are inspired to live bright, live bold, and share bright vibes. Alone, it can be hard to change, but together we can change the world. Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. Dr. Dain Heer, welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. So happy to have you on today.
Thanks, Matt. It's a pleasure.
And that is not a filter. You've alerted me already that is not a filter behind you. That's the real deal. That's your backyard.
Yes, this is where I live. Well, theoretically, it's where I'm, this is my home. Let's put it that way.
Right. Is that Papua New Guinea? I don't think it is. Where are you located?
Lovely Houston, my friend. Treasures can be found anywhere in this world.
I am just amazed and shocked because when you told me that originally, I was like, because I, doing my show research, I realized that you were based out of Texas, but I was like, wow, it does not, in my mind, Houston does not look like that. Now I've been through Houston. I don't think I've spent any time in there. I kind of flown through it, but it did have, I do remember seeing trees, but I don't remember seeing that many trees. You've got like different varieties of trees.
I know it's interesting. You fly over Houston and there's a lot of greenery around here.
Yeah.
And I'm very fortunate. I've got a bayou back there. So I've got about an acre of land, and it's really, really nice to be surrounded by this much nature. I'm very grateful.
Yes, it's really beautiful. So for people tuning in, listening, I don't want you to tune out yet because we're talking about landscape. But we've got a great show in front of us today because you are one of the people that I love to talk to the most because you have a book literally called Being You, Changing the World, which we're going to dive into that. But this is your life. You've been doing this for a long time. You started as a chiropractor. Then you've morphed, ebbed. You've got different modalities that you utilize when you're coaching people, doing workshops. I mean, you're what I consider the real deal. You're not only writing books and doing and talking about it, but you're doing it in the world, and then you're encouraging others to do it in the world as well. Would that be fair to say?
Absolutely, and I think that's really where the rubber meets the road. Is it's one thing to realize that you can change things in your life. You can actually have a glorious, miraculous life, which sounds cheesy to a lot of people, but that's one thing. But the real gift is in letting other people know they can too.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And so spreading the change, right? Spreading the joy, spreading the change, spreading the knowledge, if you would.
But we got a world that could, use a little assistance right now.
Yes, one hand up, one hand down, right? As we learn, we share, and that's how we all grow together. What I've found from doing hundreds of episodes on this podcast, which I'm so grateful to be able to do, to talk to, people like you, is that typically their backstory is full of potholes or full of things that we would consider trauma or very traumatic or very hard life lessons. And then they've somehow, instead of letting that crush them, they've bottled that up. They use it as rocket fuel to propel them forward in usually it's almost always some type of life of service to others through books, trainings, workshops, or just their expression of life. And just reading a little bit about your backstory, if you don't mind, I'd like to touch on a little bit of your backstory because I think it's so important to understand kind of the context of why you do what you do. It's one thing that you talk positively and you think positively, and I'm assuming you act positively in the world, but you have a pretty big why, right? And the why is usually the big motivation. So give us a little bit about your backstory, kind of how you grew up. You didn't grow up like being a fashionista of clothing, which I do love your fashion, by the way. I've seen your different videos. I've seen the suits and the shirts. I'm just like, man, that guy dresses nice. You're a sharp dresser. I'll just put it that way. And it looks like you travel literally all over the world. So you have a pretty nice life, but that wasn't always the case. If that is,
yeah. Right? Yeah, absolutely. So if we go back to young childhood, I was living in the ghetto with my mom. We had absolutely no money. So we moved in with these people where I was dynamically abused, physically, sexually, and not counting the emotional element of that, where people were literally beating my little naked body with belts.
Oh.
And yet, even in the middle of that, while that was going on, I always had in the back of my mind, it doesn't have to be this way. I just somehow knew it doesn't have to be this way. And I had experienced other very mean people that I lived with as I was growing up who just did not like me around, and made that very clear. And okay, so, but I had never given up hope until I got to 30 years old, where, because for me, in my mid 20s, I started more of a spiritual journey, you know, from this awareness that I know there's got to be something else possible. I started meeting people who were talking about different possibilities, exploring metaphysics, exploring different psychological things, etc. And so what would happen is I'd go to a weekend workshop and I would get this amazing awareness of what should be possible by the end of the workshop. And I was like, yay, I finally got it figured out. And what I was asking for was basically happiness and some more ease with money, because that was an area of struggle for so much of my life. And, you know, growing up with that. And I would think, yay, I finally can do this now. And by Wednesday of the following week, it would feel like the universe caved in on my head and I'd lost all the changes and I didn't have any recourse. I didn't have any way to change it. And this occurred over and over and over. And finally, this occurred one day, literally on a Wednesday after a weekend workshop. I was 30 years old. I'm starting my second chiropractic practice, living in Santa Barbara, friggin' paradise, hating my life at this point, and thinking I had the answer again after a weekend workshop. Wednesday morning rolls around, and once again, the universe caves in on my head. And for the first time in my 30 years on the planet, I had finally given up hope. And I went, universe, I'm done. Because part of what I wanted to do was bring other people possibilities, and I didn't see that happening either. You know, I became a chiropractor because I wanted to create miracles in people's bodies and their lives, because I saw others that were doing it. And I thought, this is great. I'd love this. This is a venue I can do. And I wasn't seeing it there either. So at that time, I went, universe, you got 6 months. Either my life truly changes and I actually get happy, or I'm out of here. And it gave me a sense of peace to know that I was finally going to get to leave. And I was looking forward to it. I was like, yay, I don't have to struggle anymore, because it's going to be over soon. And I was leafing through the independent paper in Santa Barbara, and this ad pops out: access, all of life comes to me with ease and joy and glory. Tiny little classified ad. And I hated it. My life is pain, suffering, and glory. You have no idea what you're talking about. And so I learned long before, though, if you love something or hate it, there's something there for you. And I called the girl and I ended up making an appointment. And while I'm talking to her, she sounds kind of like a happy marshmallow. You know, she's not trying to sell me anything. She's just like, yeah, we got this. What's that?
That's just funny. Happy. I've never heard that this expression before. So that must be some California, Texas hybrid of a happy marshmallow.
Exactly. And I was just like, wow, this is different. Okay, cool. And so we did a session. I went into it depressed and suicidal, ready to get the heck out of here. And I came out of it with a sense of gratitude for being alive. And there was a sense of space that and in my world, I was like, I always knew this should be possible. And here it was, an hour and 15 minutes later. And I had giggled through half of the session. And I was like, whoa. And I remember the moment where I went, wow, if it feels like this to be alive, I'm in. Let's go. And so it was this process that was done, this light touch technique on the head we call bars. But what she also gave me at the end of that session, she gave me a tool to use. And I didn't know what was going to be the effect, but she's like, hey, you know, if it ever seems like this space is decreasing, use this tool. And I went, okay. So here I am. I wake up Wednesday morning. Again, I was not a fan of Wednesdays for a very long time. And I wake up and it feels like all this is caved in on my head again. And I use the tool, which in that case was, who does this belong to? Which is like, is this actually mine? And it disappeared. And I had that space again. And I went, wow. And so we got together once a week and she would do this session and then she would give me a different tool. And every time the universe wanted to cave in on my head, I would use the tool and I would have that space again. And I was like, this is what I always knew was possible. And while that was occurring, within just a few short weeks, I was like, wow, I'm actually starting to live in the way I would actually like to. And long story short, I met the founder who came for a session in my office, and we became fast friends upon meeting each other. And we started exploring this area of consciousness together. And within a few months, I was like, well, chiropractic, you have been very wonderful. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So you ditched chiropractic. Did you close your practice? Did you just walk away?
Yeah. And
Wow.
what I did was I actually transitioned because in one of the first sessions I did on him, he said, look, ask my body what it wants and follow the energy. Don't stick in a chiropractic box or any other box. And I went, okay. And he was the first person who ever said, you will know what to do. And so I just went, okay, whatever I know, let's do it. And at one point I'm standing 10 feet away from him and he's flopping on the table like a fish. And I'm literally just standing there being with him.
Right.
But when while this is going on, it's like there are universes. I can't even explain it. Just things popping out there in the world that are contributing to this. And I am as amazed and surprised as anybody. But the effect that it had in his body and his world, it was like, oh, this is a different way of working with people. So I started doing that and started working with people in that way. And my practice transitioned to working with that, but then also traveling and doing this. But what was interesting is after several thousand sessions that I did and helping people change things that they hadn't previously been able to change, people asked me, can you show us what you do? And I'm like, let me try. And so I realized I can't show anybody what I do, but I could show them what they could do. And that was where the magic really started happening was, guys, we all have capacities to do things, to contribute to people and their bodies and their lives and our own and each other. And that was where, for me, what I'd always wanted to be able to be and bring to people started showing up.
Nice. And that had to light you up, I'm sure, fulfilled sense of purpose, connection, spiritual awakening. I mean, all of those things, right?
Absolutely. And seeing these people go out in the world and take it and expand upon it and thrive has been one of the most amazing gifts. Because one of the things that was so tough for me when I experienced so much of what I experienced as a kid was the sense of separation from others when I knew it could be different, but nobody wanted different. They just wanted to make me wrong for being different or abuse me for being different. And this was like, hey, you know what? All of our difference is a gift. Let's all contribute that to each other.
Right. Totally. Yeah. And there's so much depth in what you just said and so much, there's so many layers to that I can feel that we could walk into. So you do this, you start helping other people. It sounds like you start helping other people explore their gifts. Right. And then did you formalize that into some type of process where you like train people to use their gifts, or was it just kind of how did that evolve, I guess?
It evolved. It was initially a class that I called Energetic Synthesis of Being, which was about all of us together in a room. And I would be the primary facilitator. I would facilitate that. And what occurred after this 3-day class is people would send me emails saying, I don't know what we did, but I feel like I'm not wrong. And I feel like I'm actually starting to create my life. Like I'm starting to know what's true for me and I'm starting to live from it. And I was like, wow. Well, after facilitating tens of thousands of people in those classes, I realized that there was a door that was opening to show people that they could do what they thought they were getting from me. And so I now call it the Symphony of Possibilities. And there are there's several thousand people around the world that are doing it right now, but what it was about was acknowledging the unique gift that they can be to others and also themselves, and opening up to a way of energetically, let's say, healing. But I'm not a big fan of the word healing because it seems like I'm going to heal you. That's not ever the way it works. It's contributing and empowering people in an energetic way to shrug off all of the, I don't know, the yoke of the realities that aren't working.
Right. And so is that what then was the catalyst for the book being You Changing the World? Is that, or part of the?
Well, the catalyst was actually that the class I was talking about before, energetic synthesis of being, because what we did was I was able to have unique conversations with people in the context of this class. And for anybody who hasn't facilitated for a day or two or three, there's a unique thing that occurs whenever any group of people get together for an open-ended exploration. And so what would happen is I could have these concepts or conversations about what being you truly is and could be, and invite them to actually experience it. And I went, wow, what would it be like if we could put this into a book form so more people could have access to it, and actually go on an energetic journey that just by reading it, they get to a sense of, I'm not only not wrong, but I'm actually pretty cool, and it's okay to be that cool. And it's okay to actually start having a sense of what's true for me and start creating life on my terms. So the Being You Changing the World book was actually birthed out of a lot of these conversations that I was having in that initial class.
And what was what has been the response to the book? Because it's been out for a while now. So, right.
Yeah.
So what feedback do you get when people read the book?
Oh, it's the best, man. It's so cool. One of the biggest is, thank you so much for this book. I didn't want to be here anymore because I felt so alone.
Right.
And now I'm living. I'm truly living. I used to think I was wrong for being who I was, and I've been made wrong my whole life. And I realized I'm really pretty cool, and I'm actually enjoying being who I am now. And there have been a number of people, because it seems to be a book that it's one of those books that finds you when you need it. And there was one lady who sent me an email of thanks because she had given it to her friend who had 4th stage cancer, who no longer had it. And I was like,
wow,
whoa.
Right.
And I've actually had several of those. And there was another lady who sent me a thank you email. She gave it to a friend who had 4th stage cancer, who said, after reading your book, she started having life behind her eyes again. And she died 6 months later and the last 6 months of her life, she said, were the best 6 months of her life.
Oh, wow. Right.
Yeah. So that, and it's interesting for me to talk about, because for me, I know that this is them. This isn't about me. It's not even about the book. It's just the book is a venue or a tool for them to get to what's actually true for them. Well, I guess hence the name of the book, Being You.
Right. Being You, Changing the World. And we've talked about kind of the being you part, but the changing the world, when I read that, I reflect back, and I don't even know if it's the accurate quote from Gandhi, but be the change, that you want to see in the world, right? I don't even know if Gandhi actually said it quite that way. In fact, I've heard that he didn't, but let's just pretend for the sake of the show that Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world, right? But being you, changing the world, kind of, what's that mean to you? And I guess, how have you seen that manifest?
Well, one of the things that's interesting is we don't often recognize the ripple effect of our choice, but also how we show up in the world. Like I was working with one lady, for example, who had this thing with her daughter, excuse me. And it was contention for the whole family. There was mom, dad, 2 boys, and the girl, and the mom and daughter were always at each other's throats. And she actually read the book, and we did some work together, and she realized the source of it. And I thought we had changed it. And so then she goes and lives her life. And she contacted me later, and she said, this is changing everything. She's like, I'm able to be loving with her. And what she talked to me about, and what I checked in on energetically, was, it was interesting because I then met the family, and they all said, thank you so much. This was tearing our family apart. So here you have 2 people who are in whatever they're in, right? Which, when we're doing things like that, when we're having trauma and drama with others, when we're having divisiveness, that's not truly us being us. When we're truly being us, and one of the tools I like to give people is, what's true for you will always make you lighter. A lie will always make you heavier. And so as they chose lightness, it transformed their whole family. So now waking up on a daily basis, they don't have the trauma they're going to have to deal with, and the heaviness of tiptoeing around mom and tiptoeing around the relationship there. And what's interesting is look at how that expands. So dad goes to work. He doesn't have this massive heaviness at home that he doesn't know how to deal with. How's he going to show up for people? He's going to be a lighter, brighter source of contribution along with mom and the kids. And you see that it had, and this is a very dynamically simplified example, but you see that it has this ripple effect of more lightness that they can bring to the world, that then they bring to somebody else. They're at the store and somebody's having a bad day and they're like, oh man, I remember what that was like. Here's a different space of possibility. Let me say a kind word. Let me acknowledge you. And that changes that heaviness. That's how we actually could be, is we could contribute a lot of lightness to each other. That's us being us, changing the world.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's why I knew this was going to be a good show right there, because I so believe in and resonate with what you're saying about, we have to do our own work, right? We have to do the work at a personal level. It's never about changing, the internal or the external world's a reflection of our internal world. That's what the monks in India used to say to me. I was like, yeah, that's great, but how do I fix my external world?
Exactly.
Right. But it's kind of coming from that space of, as we shift and maybe, heal trauma or transcend trauma or whatever, however we choose to see that, the internal trauma, then the external world naturally has to shift. We're different people. We're having a different reality. We're having a different experience, right? And then that, to your point, kind of is contagious to some degree in a positive way, right? It's like a good virus, not a bad, right? It's
exactly.
It starts to spread and spread positivity because of the ripple in itself. And I think we can all relate to being around people that we just always feel good when we're around them.
Yeah.
Right. Your day's better because I've got several friends of mine that I just like going to lunch with them, or like just, visiting with them, just because at the end of that, I always feel lighter. I always have an opportunity. And what you said kind of rings true in that I always have an opportunity to be more my authentic self, or at least get to express parts of myself that I don't always get to express if there's not that space of comfortability or trust. Right. So
absolutely,
the people that I, love to be around are typically, I can say anything I want. I can think anything I can express. And there's non-judgment there. And then conversely, I am non-judgmental. It's just kind of this open, trusting. We can say things that maybe aren't appropriate in certain circles, or aren't, because we can just kind of let it out. It's almost like not a vent session, but just the ability to say, blah, just kind of like, and then it's like, okay, it's almost like a processing that happens in that. But when we're around those people, we always feel better, and they emanate that positivity, or at least it maybe help us find our own divinity or our own light. What's your take on that?
Well, I'd say both. And one of the greatest gifts is to be around somebody who doesn't judge you. And that's rare. But I go to see, one of the concepts that I have is, and once again, what's true for you makes you lighter, a lie makes you heavier. So judgment always makes you heavier, therefore judgment is a lie. But also the idea that we're infinite beings. Would an infinite being judge? No. And when we're truly being us, we don't. And we can be around people who have such a degree of non-judgment that it's okay to be everything that we are, even if we're in the middle of judging ourselves for something. And and that's the beginning of the expression in the world of lightness. And we have a world where let's take every bit of lightness we can and magnify it. And we have a definition of consciousness and access consciousness, which is where everything exists and nothing is judged. And
beautiful.
that applies on a personal level, but also on every level. And as you function from that, you start to give yourself permission to be that authentic self that you are. And you start to realize that that the judgment that you might want to do of you about something isn't actually creating more, but you need to be in the space of not judging you for a bit before you can even recognize that, because most people are walking around in a whirlwind of judgment of themselves that they've learned from the time they were tiny, as though that is what we need to do to know what to choose. We need to judge good from bad, right from wrong. This is acceptable. This is not acceptable. But if you think of any of the great quote unquote spiritual teachers, or any of the people that you think are really cool people, it's because they're not doing that.
Right. Right.
They're there saying, hey, I know you got all kinds of stuff, but hi, nice to see you. So glad you're here. And we can be that way if we would allow ourselves the choice.
Yeah. And I have not talked about this on the show because it's fairly recent, but on this show, I am very transparent with my own life and my own struggles, because I think that's how we all learn, is from each other, right? We learn kind of how to navigate this. And so I actually went to do a psilocybin retreat here about 2 weeks ago. And in that, it slowed my brain down enough that I could see that there were basically no waking moments where my mind wasn't judging. And judging probably even gets a little bit of a bad rap. And certainly I've still got a little bit of a negative connotation with the whole word judging, but the analyzing, labeling, trying to assign meaning, those are all judgments. And so I could literally, because of the way the medicine worked on my brain, it kind of went from a place of just observation to then as the medicine was processing, I could literally see I went from observation to watching those judgments start to come in. And then it was amazing to me just to see the amount of, again, judgment, but judgment, thinking, detachment from the present moment. And it became a practice as throughout that day, that specific day, it became a practice to see if I could just stay present without the judging. And it was like work. I mean, it was like serious intention and expression. And I just realized that, yes, and I even have to forgive myself sometimes just for that, not wanting to think, not wanting to judge, right? Because then I'm judging my judging, right? But it was very interesting to see that, but pretty much every waking moment, and probably most sleeping moments, I'm judging and labeling and trying to assign happiness or sadness or joy or blame or something to it just to make meaning of it, versus just looking at the flower, not needing to call it the flower, just observing the flower, taking the flower in, and just in an observant way, right? Versus saying that's a flower, it's yellow, it probably smells good. Oh, there's a bee, right? It's just on and on and on and on. So it was very interesting. I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with that. I've just been trying to be more present with breath, with, well, breathing.
Can I throw another wrench into the works that might help? One of the things that we found is that 98% of your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your judgments, your points of view are things you're picking up from other people.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because we're like big psychic radio receivers. Like, I remember I used to try meditating, and I say try on purpose.
Right.
And I would be there, my mind would finally get quiet, and I'd be like, oh my God, I got to pick up the kids. And then I'm like, I don't have kids.
What? I didn't think, I was like, I don't remember reading that in your Bible. So I was like, oh, he has kids. Interesting.
Yeah. Surprise. Right.
Right.
No. And it wasn't until I got to Access and they said, hey, 98% of your thoughts, feelings, and emotions are things you're picking up from other people. That's where the monkey mind comes from. Interesting. And I was like, what? Yeah. And so, when I said Wednesday after this bars session that I had where all this stuff came in, the question that I asked was, who does this belong to? And instantly I was back to the space. And I went, oh. And then I had a guy come into my office. I'd been working on him for 3 months, and he was at 8 out of 10 back pain. And nothing I would do would get rid of it. It would go down to a 3 or a 4. And then he would come back the next week and it would be at 8 out of 10. And I told him, you need to go see somebody else. He's like, I'm only seeing you because you're the only one who gets me out of this much pain. And I was like, oh crap, I'm stuck with him. So after having the bars, after getting this awareness, he comes in the following week and he's going to lie down. Takes him about 5 minutes to relax so I can work on him, because I was working on people face down to start at that time. And I went, I got a question for you. I said, who does this pain belong to? And he pushes himself up and looks over and goes, my wife. Wow. And I was like, I've never seen the man move that fast in the time that I've known him. Right.
Wow.
And I went, okay, tell me the story, dude. He went, well, my wife had, she got injured and she was in such terrible pain that she had a laminectomy, a very invasive back surgery. And he said it was supposed to get rid of the pain, but it didn't. And it just kept getting worse to the point where she was on morphine to get rid of the pain that she would only take sometimes because it just debilitated her so much. And she was limping by me in such pain. And I care for this woman so much. He said, I remember the moment where I went, I would do anything to get her out of pain. He said, within the next few days, her pain started subsiding. About a week later, I started having this back pain. I thought it was because I was playing tennis and I, tweaked my back. He said, but it's been progressing ever since. And that was 3 years ago. And I was like, whoa. So I work with this guy using access consciousness tools. We have a way of going back to the point of creation of wherever you made a stupid decision, or you don't call it stupid at the time, but has that effect, right? Wherever you made a decision like that. And so I did some of this with him in addition to the acknowledgement of what he had done. Now, if hearing this story probably sounds insane to most people, I know it would have to me had I not been the one experiencing it. Okay. So I just want to acknowledge how nuts it probably sounds. But at this point, most of the miracles in my life sound nuts to other people. My life is pretty much filled with them. So here we are.
That's why they're called miracles, right? Because
exactly. Nobody can explain it.
Right. Exactly.
So this guy got out of 98% of his pain that day. And every time it went to come back, I said, ask, who does this belong to? Is it actually mine? Or am I trying to heal somebody? And he went, okay. And that was it. It never friggin' came back.
Wow.
Yeah. So to the point you were speaking about, all of the continuous going forth. And I used to have the same thing. And we have this tool where we suggest that you ask, who does this belong to? To every thought, feeling, and emotion you have, every judgment, every point of view for 3 days, every computation you're doing about anything. And if it lightens up at all, if it gets a little less, just return it to sender, because it's not yours. You're just picking up on that vibe, and your computer kicks in and starts processing in the same way. But if it's not yours, you can't do anything about it. But what you can do, if you do this for 3 days, at the end of 3 days, you walk around like you're in a walking, talking meditation. And we even created an app for that. That's free. Anybody can download it. It's Access Consciousness. Who does this belong to? In an effort to give people an easy way to be reminded to ask this question. But it's one of the things Access has is about 8,000 tools, and none of them are like anything else you've ever seen. And they work really dynamically in the trenches of life, because once again, when we're truly being us, we have a lightness. And it contributes to us and it contributes to everybody. It's just that most people have been taught that all the heavy things are what they need to focus on. But what's true for you is light. What's heavy is a lie. So if you're in the middle of doing something heavy, we all know what it's like to go down the internet rabbit hole of hell, and, you click on something because it's got a clickbaity title.
Right.
5 minutes in, you're like so depressed, you want to kill yourself, and you keep watching, hoping it's going to resolve itself by the end, except by the end, they're like, and now buy this, bye-bye, and you're like, oh, I hate you. But what we need to do is, when we're going down into heaviness, back up and go, okay, what else can I choose here? What else is possible I've never considered? What's right about me that I'm not getting? And what other choices do I have that I've never imagined that will actually create lightness for me?
There's a lot there.
Yeah.
There's a lot there. Just a little bit. 8,000 tools.
8,000
just a little.
tools.
8,000 tools.
It is stuff.
I love it. So currently, because you've got a breadth of work there, right? Currently, kind of what are you doing kind of on a daily basis? What's lighting up your world now? What are you kind of focused on now currently, and how you're contributing to the world, I guess, like literally on a daily basis? Kind of what's your life like now?
Oh, goodness. So many things. I'm very fortunate to interact with a lot of people, and most of it is on how do we give you access to the space of your being that is beyond definition, beyond a definable reality. Like, back on May 22nd, I created something 2 years ago that this was the third one, called International Being You Day. And it was about a celebration of us being us. And it was open to everybody, once again, free, because I'm a big believer in inspiring people from the acknowledgement of them, but also from people who have actually walked a path that where you can get nuggets of wisdom and nuggets of possibility that you can apply to your own life. And recently I created an app. It's called the Being You app. You're noticing a theme probably, because that for me is where it all comes from. Even though, to some people it can sound cheesy. Well, what's being you? It's like, that's where all the magic, all the miracles can show up. And this app is also free. And if you search on my name and Being You, you'll find it. But see, having been where I was 23 years ago, where I was ready to get out, and having worked with hundreds of thousands of people in the last 23 years who have been in similar or different situations, it's like what lights me up is inviting people into a creative process that where the creation is from them getting in touch with what's true for them and recognizing the gift that they are. So it's like I truly facilitate classes all around the world, and this energetic synthesis of being class, it's interesting to see that more and more people are attracted to it. There's a class called Being You, Changing the World. That's a 3-day class. I just did one of those in Madrid recently. And what encourages me is it used to have a sense for many years that I was, in essence, like fighting harder for them than they were. It was more like, no, just wave your magic wand at me and change my life. I'm like, that's not the way it works.
Right.
It's like, I know that a lot of things promise that. I'm like, I will never promise you that, but I know that you're capable of far more than you think I can give you. And what I'm seeing now is people who are like, okay, I get it. How do I change this? What tools, what inspiration can you give me? What can you show me that's possible that I can choose? That old thing about you teach a person to fish, you feed them for a day. I'm sorry, you give them a fish, you feed them for a day. Teach them, they feed themselves for the rest of their lives. And that's really what this is about. And I see people taking it and expanding their influence in their lives, their families, but also in the world.
I love it. Love it. Very cool stuff. Yeah. There's just, there's lots of, when's your next workshop coming up?
Next workshop is actually in Dubai, and it's an energetic synthesis of being class. And in order to get there, there's a class or two that it has prerequisites. And then the next class after that is in India. Wow. And it's called Symphony of Possibilities, which is where people take this and they start working on other people and find out that you truly can change the world by your very touch.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting. And why the international, is it typically people flying there to experience it, or is it people at the location that are typically interacting
Both.
in the workshop? Is it? Okay.
Both. And we have in Access Consciousness, we have over 10,000 facilitators around the world that do different levels of the work. And so, see, our perspective is, a lot of personal development, if you want to call it that, organizations, it's like they tend to be country centric, wherever they started, it's like, okay, this is, for us, we realized really the one thing that will change the face of the planet and create a sustainable living earth is more consciousness, more awareness. And a lot of people think if their eyes are open, they're conscious. That's not exactly how it works. If your eyes are open, good for you. But consciousness is where there's a lot more possibilities available. And we live in a world in which people choose a lot of unconsciousness, which is unawareness, and also anti-consciousness, which is where they have awareness, but they won't choose it, or they'll choose against it specifically. Like if you've ever been driving and, the GPS says turn left, and yet you're like, no, I got to turn right. I got to turn right. You turn left and you're stuck in traffic for 2.5 hours. It's like, yeah, you knew, you just chose not to follow it. And the more people start to follow their knowing, they start to realize they have a thing called knowing, And that thing is actually a gift. And what we realized was the more consciousness that everybody in the world has, and this is not access consciousness, this is consciousness, period. The more they're willing to function from everything is possible and not judge anything, the greater our world gets. Because one of my targets personally is to create a sustainable living earth for at least the next 10,000 years, where what we do is truly sustainable. And what's interesting, we have so many advances in technology at this point, which I think is wonderful, but we're making technology the source. But all of those advances came from an advancement in consciousness first.
Right.
That's where they started. It starts here in our awareness first before it ever actualizes physically. And so what are we capable of if we recognize that we're not what we thought we were? We're actually, the idea that we're, some people say we're physical creatures having a spiritual experience. Some people will say we're spiritual creatures having a spiritual experience. My point of view is we're conscious creatures. Let's start choosing according to that. And it has impacts in our personal relationships. It has impacts in how we perceive ourselves in relationship to the world. So it has an impact every moment of every day of our own living, but it also has an impact in worldwide what we realize we're capable of and can choose together. Because that is one of the crucial elements of it, that we all live on this planet together. This planet is all of our homes, and what happens for one of us happens for all of us. And we got to recognize that we're not only interconnected, but that interconnection is part of our gift, even though it has been seen as something that limits us because we pick up on so much heaviness that people choose. But what other choices do we have available that we've never acknowledged?
You sure you're not a monk? You sure? Are you sure?
Pretty sure.
Because you sound pretty monkish in a good way. In a good way. I mean that as a compliment, 110%. I'm like, I could just sit here and listen to you all day and just like absorb it. I'm absorbing it. I'm not even, most of it I'm not even thinking about. I'm just absorbing it. I'm going, there's some truthisms. You've got some truth bombs in there. Some truthisms are definitely going off.
Well, I'm glad you're not thinking about it too, because that really, it's like, oh yeah, that. Okay, cool. It's like, if you just go, yeah, that, and go on and live your life knowing that too,
Right.
We have one phrase in Access, which is all of life comes to me with ease and joy and glory. And glory is exuberant expression and abundance. And if you just use that 10 times in the morning, you just say it 10 times in the morning out loud or in your head, and 10 times in the evening, you notice it starts to create a space in which more ease starts showing up and life becomes less of a struggle. But that's the whole point, really. Let's enjoy being alive. Let's not place so much value on our suffering as though it's getting us somewhere, because it's not getting anybody anywhere.
Right. Yes, we're not doing it on behalf of something. Right.
Yeah. And we have this idea that our suffering is somehow contributing to people, but is it really? If you're suffering, do you encourage people to know that suffering is possible? Yes. Well, if you're not suffering, do you inspire the people to know that not suffering is possible? And what would be possible if we were willing to inspire others rather than try to lift them out of the cesspool from below?
I love that. Be the light, right?
Yeah.
Light doesn't do anything. It shines, right? It's not a doing, it's a being. Right? Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you so much for spending time with me today. Thank you for just coming on and trusting the show and shining the light in our corner of the world. And that world literally is, worldwide, because this is a podcast. We go to, 50 some countries. So I appreciate you coming and shining the light in our space so that we may fulfill our mission of raising the vibration. That's why we're called BriteVibe. We want to brighten the vibration of the world, right? We want to lift others up and be inspirational. And a big part of that's bringing people like you on the show to kind of show us, and I would even say remind us that there is a different way to live, right? We got to remember who we are and wipe the mud from our eyes, so to speak.
And thank you for having me, Matt. It's truly been a pleasure.
Yeah, definitely. Where do your website, which is easy to find, but it's Dr. Dain Heer, right? .com.
Yeah.
That was pretty, yeah. And it's, DainHeer.com, and all your resources. You got a great website. It's got tons of resources and information on you and what you do. So I definitely highly encourage our listeners, if this spoke to you at all, go out there and check that out. It's amazing. And you do have an open invitation to come to Asheville. For those listeners out there, I've talked about a little bit. My family and I are moving to Asheville, North Carolina. So if you're going to be in the Asheville area, please hit me up, go to our Facebook page and let me know, and be happy to go to lunch with you or go to dinner or whatever. But Dain, you have an open invitation to come hang out and go hiking and get out. We both believe in nature and the healing powers of nature, I believe. So I definitely come out and we'll do some hiking and some whitewater rafting and get out there and breathe in all that God's created for us to enjoy.
That sounds awesome.
Oh, so thank you so much for coming on today. And I look forward to a continued relationship with you and what you do. And certainly know that there's always an open invitation to come back on the show anytime. If there's something that you want to talk about, I am always open to talking about it.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Matt. Grateful for you and everything you're bringing to the world.
Thank you. You as well. And you have a good rest of your week.
Will do.
Thanks, Dain. Bye.
Thanks so much, Matt.
Thank you for being a part of the BriteVibe podcast. For more information, go to britevibe.com. That's BRITE Vibe, VIBE.com. Thank you for listening.